So, Jobs to be Done is a framework that's not only applicable to product design or even marketing messaging, it's something that you can bring into your strategic planning and you can make customer unmet needs or the customer struggles, you can make them the foundation for your business goals, including things like OKRs. And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's Jobs to be Done Untangled. My name is Jim Callback. I am the author of the Jobs to be Done playbook and co-founder of the Jobs to be Done Toolkit.
Along with me, I'm Elaine Mathias, one of the co-founders of the Jobs to be Done Toolkit. Welcome to our monthly community event, Jobs to be Done Untangled. Before we dive in with introducing our guest speaker, Fred, I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we have coming up at the Jobs to be Done Toolkit. We are a resource for Jobs to be Done. So we have some workshops, some mini conferences, different ways that you can work with us. So coming up in the next couple of weeks on May 13th and 14th, Fred and I will be leading a very conveniently timed 2-day, 4-hour total instructional time workshop on writing OKRs with jobs to be done. And so he will illustrate some of that today for us. And then following that, we have our very popular mini course, Applying the Core Process. That's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday over lunch for 2 hours, lunch if you're in the East Coast of the US. Jim is offering coaching services. So if you want anybody to audit your work, give you guidance, mentorship, Jim is a great person to go to. And then lastly, we have our next community event, our May Untangled on May 29th. And I will drop all of these links into the chat throughout the event today. But if you have any questions, please keep joining us. We love to talk about jobs to be done. So here we go.
Yep.
All
And
right.
if you have any questions during today's session, put those into the Zoom chat because at the end, we're going to come back and have a nice, healthy discussion. And I think with that, we'll go right over to Fred.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Welcome,
Thank you.
Fred.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Jim. Real pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Appreciate it. I'll try and share my screen.
Yep, I'll stop sharing.
See if that works.
Just let me stop. There you go. It's all yours, Fred.
Does that work? You guys seeing my screen okay?
Yeah.
We can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so very quick introduction from me. I'm founder of a company called Elevating Work, and this is really a culmination of my career, which is about value discovery, definition, and delivery, helping a number of clients doing that. And the way my preferred approach, my preferred flavor for doing those three things is a combination of jobs to be done for perceiving customer needs, OKRs for essentially focusing strategic execution, and Lean Agile for enabling value, flow, and quality. So I'm an instructor in these things. So I've been doing this quite a while, an Agile Academy ambassador as well, OKR mentors, trainer. Work with McKinsey on advising on a lot of these things, train McKinsey on jobs to be done, a number of things. Got lots of interesting articles that you may want to check out after this on the combination of those three things. It's one of my passions and joys to think about the intersection of those three things. So today I'm going to talk about three things. What's in terms of driving value, what I see the problem to be, what are the causes that I'm seeing? I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, of course. And what's an answer to that? And that's a little bit of an introduction to the course, which is coming up in a little while, which is really about sort of going from customer struggles to a driving team direction and building OKRs that drive value. So without further ado, I'll crack on with actually what we're talking about. Now, using the chat, and maybe Elaine can shout out the numbers. I've got a couple of questions for you. So one of the problems I see is companies can't agree on what a customer need is. Now, the MIT Sloan Management School did a survey. They came out with a percentage of companies that couldn't agree. So what do you think they came up with? What number, what percentage do you think they come up with? Let's use the chat, see what we come up with. What percentage do you think MIT found in that? What are we getting at the moment?
I'm seeing, oh gosh, we've got a wide array. So 83, I think Jim is still the highest, 45, 75, 70. Vladimir is so far the lowest.
All right, so very high. Those who are guessing higher are according to this anyway, 95% couldn't agree what a customer need is. Interesting. Very interesting finding they had. Interesting. The second question I have for you is more about strategic execution. So this is for software projects. A company called the Standish Group, been studying software projects. They did quite a few, 10,000 software projects. This is in 2020. And they looked at what percentage of these software projects either failed or were late and or over budget. So what do you think the percentage of strategic software projects in 2020 which either failed or were late on or over budget? What numbers, what percentage do you think? Have a guess.
Oh, we got 80% right off the bat.
All right.
Jim has a pretty high percentage here, 95%. Oh, we got 93.5.
Oh, very cynical lot. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the actual answer is 70%. 70% were either failed or were late and or over budget. So you can see that I would say that the issue is quite a big problem. Now, why so little agreement on customer needs? Well, we know the problems. It's really, one is we're drowning in a lot of information about customers. It's not that we don't know about customers. We have almost too much information about customers. We have lots and lots of different ways of understanding what a customer need or specifying a customer need. There's a ton of ways. And there's a lot of kind of ambiguity around what is really happening with the customer. So I think this is what drives this very high, what you say, well, very poor signal to noise ratio when it comes to understanding customer needs. The second one is really around why strategy execution fails. Now, this is a blog I wrote. This is a Standish Group. Actually, 30% are successful, 50% are challenged, which is they're over budget, delayed, or missing functionality, and 20% fail. Now, the reason for that are quite interesting. Now, about 70% are really to do with what OKRs can address. So lack of clear objectives and alignment, executive sponsorship and visibility is not good, scope creep and prioritization. So I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of these things. And if you think about what actually that costs, I've written a blog on it recently. If you estimate the software industry is around 7.5 trillion 2025, according to Gartner, you think about that 20% that's failing. That's over 1 trillion of investment, which is at risk. So this is not a small issue, not a small problem. Now, in terms of the answer, I believe there's two areas which I believe are really helpful. Of course, jobs to be done. Why wouldn't we think about that? For increasing the impact of the product solution, but also I think in terms of strategy execution with OKRs. I think the combination of these two, I think, are very powerful in improving let me call that value at risk. So if you think about if you're going to sell this to your CEO or CFO, why would you want to do this? It's really the value at risk. You're taking a big risk if you don't implement these two together, I would say, and combining these two help you in terms of your predictability and profitability. So from a job to be done point of view, I think there's a kind of shift in focus for companies to go from a product market view to a market product view. So really understanding the customer, what the customer's trying to achieve. This is the foundational course that Jim and Elaine run. Really about understanding why customers hire or fire your product, really to make progress in their lives, and really understanding that view. So this really a lens, and this is an image. Actually, the first image you might see, this is a night vision camera, and this is a thermal imaging camera. It's actually the same image, but you can see that the customer's very clear when you use the right kind of lens. And I think that's the analogy for jobs to be done, in my opinion. It's really, that's the lens which makes the difference. The second one is really important, and this is in demand side sales from Bob Moesto. He talks about when we shouldn't try and sell solutions to customers. We should help customers to buy solutions. Now, it seems like the same thing, but they're very subtly, importantly different. A customer is struggling to get a job done. Jim talked about that at the beginning. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand at what point are they struggling, and how can we show up at the right time to help them move forward, to help them make progress in their journey of actually buying the product. So when you think about it from that lens, like it's almost a 180 shift, in my opinion. When you think about it from that lens, that point of view, then you start to see the world a little bit differently when it comes to trying to sell products and solutions. The other thing I think which needs to change in the OKR industry is the maturity. I saw a stat the other day that something like 70% of companies are using OKRs, but only about 20% admit to doing them well. So I think there's a big disparity in OKR maturity. And one of the things I'm working with with the OKR Mentors Group is to help to measure OKR maturity and relate that to value at risk. So clearly, if you're not good at strategic execution, then don't be surprised if you don't deliver all of your strategic execution projects. So there's a relationship between that and between maturity, I should say, and strategic execution. So there's a little bit of also things certainly around the key results that there's a lack of maturity in really understanding what is causal about the key results. So there's a lot of key results are a bit random, to be fair. They don't really understand why, what are the chain of events which are happening, which cause customers to buy products and therefore increase sales and so on and so on and so on. So I think there's a relationship between, if you get the jobs to be done piece right, then you understand really the changes which are happening inside the customer, what they're trying to achieve, and that's really then you start to see what kind of changes in behavior you want to be measuring in your OKRs. So there's a relationship between the two, and I think this is what the course is trying to get to. So let me try and explain to you very quickly what we're trying to do on the course. This is something called the trigger model, and it's based on Bob Moesto's customer journey and switch model. And the idea is that as a customer tries to overcome their struggle, they go through a number of stages, and this goes from first thought to seeking solutions to shopping to buying to evaluating and so on. And then and what the trigger model is really focused on is at these decision points, do you know what's going on in the customer's mind? And what we're trying to do on the course is to interview customers and get them to think about when they last purchased something, and ask them about what's going on in their journey and what are the things which cause them to go from a first thought to seeking, or from seeking to shopping or to buying, etc., etc. So that's the general idea. So on the course, what we do is we essentially explore what the customer's problems are. We unpack the decision journey they're going through. We reveal what's going on with something what we call a struggle statement, which is understanding what's the core struggle going on. And then from that, we define a set of needs, which are desired outcomes, which are the measures of how the customer will decide whether or not they're making progress. And then from that, we can go ahead and formulate the OKRs. In addition to that, so we create a canvas for that. We talk you through that. We'll walk you through that during the course. But that's essentially it. I know that was super fast, but I really wanted to pause there and go for questions really, and see if that resonated with anybody, whether that confused anybody, whether anyone has any follow-up questions. be happy to hear anything from
Yeah,
anybody.
we do have a couple of questions. That's great. Fred, thanks for that overview. I guess we can jump right into the thoughts from the group, Elaine. Is that right?
Yeah, let's do
Okay,
that.
great. I'm going to start with Evan Shore. I didn't see you come in. Evan, are you here?
Hello.
Hey there. You were asking about your tech product with caregivers. Do you want to rephrase or read your question?
Sure. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Evan.
So I've noticed that there's a misalignment between jobs to be done and how you get paid. And every time I try to partner with a B2B organization, it can only innovate for the consumer in as much as it improves their P&L. And there was a caregiving company that had a really robust jobs to be done lens when they started. I'm going to help the family and the caregiver make progress around different things in the aging journey. And then I said, so show me your roadmap. They showed me the whole list of things. And I said, how are you prioritizing? They said, well, most of this is going away because we can't get paid for it by Medicare. It doesn't improve a clinical outcome or reduce medical costs, but it benefits consumers. So I'm trying to figure out how you create a person-centered company that's based on jobs to be done when the economic model doesn't align with it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll open it up to the floor. Jim, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I had a similar question too around B2B. Is a slightly different flavor. I think from my standpoint, theoretically, I'm not going to answer your question directly yet, Evan, but theoretically, in a B2B situation, you very often have a buyer who's very, very separate from the end users, right? And the financial and economic concerns are kind of separated from the actual value that you might create, because it's not like in B2C where the buyer is the consumer, right? So you have that division. However, I think if you're a buyer in a B2B situation, you should care about the value that you create for people downstream. That is, how the value that people are getting out of the solution should be your buying decision as a good buyer of B2B solutions, right? In the example that you said, though, Evan, you mentioned that there was a restriction. Is that right? That there was a regulation that came into play that seemed to be the cutoff point?
For example, like when you're caregiving, you struggle to understand the dietary preferences of somebody, or I'm making this up. I don't remember exactly what it was. It didn't align, but it was like, I struggle to prepare meals for this person. Or when I'm trying to age independently, I have trouble keeping up with my household chores.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things was, hey, let's go find a housekeeper that can come in and be able to book that for somebody.
Yeah.
Housekeeping is not reimbursed by Medicare.
Gotcha. Understand. Yeah. So it's the reimbursement policy. For me, that's actually more on the solution side then, right? So when you come up with the solution, so Jobs to be done is going to tell you what problem to solve, but not what solution to create. And I think that constraint, the solution needed to be designed with that constraint in mind. You see what I'm saying?
Well, also Medicare doesn't pay for home maintenance.
Okay, well, we could. I don't know what Medicare does or does not pay for, but those constraints need to be part of the solution making. That's where I would put that. I don't know about you, Fred. Yeah.
That's exactly right. The consumer wanted a They wanted to put home maintenance on autopilot.
Yeah.
And health plans do not do that.
Right.
And therefore they constrained their solution to only focus on the other things. But one of the biggest problems that they uncovered is that home maintenance is really a challenge for older people with disabilities.
So So maybe
would
then
suggest-
this is, if this isn't what isn't currently offered, then I would say there's an opportunity there, because that sounds like what we call an underserved need. So it's important to the person, it's important to that individual, and they're not getting that service from the current provider in terms of what's existing. So you could think about then, what's the business case for that? Now, are there enough people who are struggling with that problem, right, in the whole of the US, right? Yeah. Multiply that out by the premium, you get an understanding of the willingness to pay for that. Yeah. Then you've got a market. You've got something where it's maybe what I call a related job to that, and then that could be something that you create in terms of the market. But you're right, there's probably a business case around providing the standard service, but then as you start to understand that, you start to uncover other new services that you might be able to offer something new to, and that would have to change the business model. So I don't think you can shoehorn it into what's there, but I think you could think about something new. That would be my thinking on it.
In which case it'd be two revenue sources, one from Medicare and one from the consumer directly.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe. Yeah.
I would suggest that the definition of customer progress always has to include constraints. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be thinking about internal, external, temporal constraints, even when defining the job as progress for the Medicare patient. And Medicare is one solution in a mix of solutions, right, to Chip's point. And so even though Medicare as a provider can't solve that job, it's still a job, right? Yep. There are other opportunities to solve that job through other avenues.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Yeah.
And it does get trickier in regulated spaces, and with government restrictions and laws. And, there's a spectrum in which jobs to be done can be directly helpful. I would argue, though, Evan, that bringing jobs to be done at least into the table is valuable when you're coming up with that solution, right? It may not provide the direct clarity, like you see in all the case studies, right? We had a problem, we did jobs to be done analysis, and we got this silver bullet solution, right? It's not going to turn out like that, but I would argue that bringing customer needs into discussion needs to be part of the equation, right? And as Fred said at the beginning, most people aren't doing that because they don't have an agreed definition on what a need is or what a struggle is, right? So we're not going to solve it here, though, Evan. But it's a great point. Is that satisfactory? I see Evan going. Okay, you guys are just blowing hot air. Are we just blowing hot air, Evan?
No, it is pretty warm here in Florida, though, where I am.
You're in Florida?
I'm at a conference at the Breakers.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
That's a beautiful hotel.
So it's very nice in the New York area. So you're missing a beautiful spring day. Mm-hmm. My question was related around that, and it had to do with what I talked about, Fred. I'm just going to dovetail on that because we were kind of in the B2B context around the buyer may not be a user, and they might not even be close to the user, right? So when you're in a B2B situation, how does that change how you think about jobs to be done in OKRs in a B2B situation?
So the way I look at it, it's very similar. We're having very similar discussion with OKR mentors at the moment. They've come up with a great solution for OKR experts, so OKR coaches, to go in and assess a customer's OKR maturity or strategic execution maturity. They call it a scan. Fantastic. So great product, targeted not for but the reason the market exists, this is an important definition of in jobs to be done. If you like, the beneficiary of that product is actually the client, the end customer.
Yeah.
The service provider is the expert, but if you took away the client, the expert wouldn't have any work, right? So that's how you know the client is actually the end user, the job beneficiary. Now, the job beneficiary also has a job buyer. So there's a person like a CFO or a CEO, someone who's going to say to them, right, why do I want to spend this money on this scanning of OKR, whatever? They're going to ask the question. Now, if you think about it from the point of value at risk, now, if you're doing OKRs well, then what happens is the probability of you achieving your strategic ambitions goes up. If you're doing OKRs poorly, it goes down. So from a buying perspective, the reason the market exists, because I want to support the experts and my OKR champions and leaders and whatever, because I want my strategic execution probability to go up. So it's a kind of like, you can think of it like an insurance, from an insurance point of view. So the way you talk to a buyer in jobs to be done is really more around the consequence. You can almost think about the consequent ad negativa. So if you didn't do this, what would be the consequence, right?
Right.
And therefore, what would be the value at risk? So it's really about a value at risk equation. That's what I'd
gotcha.
I would think about.
Yeah, I just noticed in your journey that you actually have up here, and I can see in the top of the canvas there. It's a lot about shopping and buying. And again, if you're in a large organization in a B2B situation, you don't shop and you don't buy. Solutions may just come at you, right?
Yeah.
So is it correct in saying that you're really looking at that economic buyer then through that lens?
You are, but there's an ecosystem of people, right?
Gotcha.
So there's an ecosystem of people. So you've got people advising the buyer, which would be the end user, but you've got the end users being advised. So there's an ecosystem. And when you're thinking about the interviews you do, you would need to interview the ecosystem to really understand what's really going on there, and how does that, because obviously you want the buyer to buy in a B2B situation, but they would be consulting lots of people on lots of things, and they'll be weighing up kind of like, economic. It would come down to economics, but in the end, it will they'll be looking at getting advice from other people. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I just want to make sure I heard you right then. So what you want to do in this more buying context is you want to bring to the table to the decision maker the risk of not getting that solution, and that risk would be your people are not going to be able to get their job done, right? So you want to be able to identify that so that you can bring that to the buyer as their risk, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes
Exactly.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope everybody else follow this conversation. I don't want to just be having me and Fred there. Thanks, Brett. In fact, Brett, since you raised your hand, you had a point, and I'd love for you to come. You had actually a couple of points. You were talking about the government military context.
Yeah.
And then you had a specific question around desired key results versus actual key results.
Yeah.
So do you want to ask Fred your question, Brett?
All right. Well, Fred, the short question is on KRs specifically, and we've had this debate, and it bothers me greatly because you wind up having this cat fight. And actually, I pulled up an article of comparing KPIs to OKRs because apparently people get these things confused, right? And what winds up happening is it all descends to KPIs. But the specific question was, hey, key results. Is it my desire? I have an objective. Is it my desired key result, or is it an objective and then the actual key result or the anticipated key result? So when you write these things, are you writing them towards what you're intending or desiring, or are you writing them more realistic or more maybe pessimistically as what you could really anticipate achieving in general terms?
Okay, so let me back up and give an analogy for those who are not like super familiar with OKRs and KPIs. If you think about driving in your car, the objective would be where you want to get to. So you're in New York, I want to go to Chicago. Chicago's the objective. The key result is the sat nav, which is telling you, how much progress am I making toward Chicago, right? So that's the measure, that's the metric. KPIs are what's on the dashboard in front of you: speed, amount of fuel, tire pressure, yada, 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 a whole bunch of things which are essentially governing the health of the vehicle to make sure we can get to Chicago, right? Now, the thing that you're right to say that OKRs eventually become KPIs, because they do. What happens is when you reach the destination, you've achieved this new standard, right? Because the OKR is something which is ambitious, which pushes you to a higher level.
Right.
When you achieve that standard, then that becomes the KPI. So now becomes a new KPI. But the key result is actually driving you and pushing you to get to a higher level to a new destination that you're not there before. That's why it goes with the objective.
Right. So the argument I've heard with KRs is more a matter of, I anticipate to be, using your analogy, we're driving to Chicago. The OKR is I need to be there in 17 hours, or I'm going to get there in 17 hours, even though it probably takes 12 because there are things that may be in the way. And so I'm giving myself some running room. Whereas the KPIs are your speed, your progress as you're going. Am I on track? Did I hit my gas stations? How many gas station stops do I have to make? How long of a break can I take? At each of these stops, so that I can hit my 17-hour hit time. On the distant end, right? Okay, that's a simplified one because there's a desire, because it's when we start talking about these broader, again, and I'm not a customer-centered guy. I spent all my time in the military and government, so I'm learning a whole new language here. So B2B, I'm actually more comfortable B2B than I am B2C because I can. I'm glad the conversation has drifted in this direction because at least I can get my arms around this a little bit more. And my biggest frustration with the JTBD stuff in the first place is having a place to use it in the military context, because the questions are mind blowing. I mean, when you ask about unmet need, right, and you sit there and talk about unmet needs, KPIs and OKRs, they just make lists, right? They throw lists out there and then they argue about whether or not they made them. And, everybody goes happy to glad and throw shoes at each other and all that kind of fun stuff. But when you start talking about, okay, as an organization that provides a service, right? We're going to deliver training, or we're going to, do whatever we're going to do. So what is the unmet need? Is the unmet need the training? Is the unmet need the instruction?
So one of the key things about a key result, it's really about a change in behavior.
Right.
So what you're really trying to measure is what behavior change are you going from and to.
Okay.
Now, for example, safety is a problem, right?
Right.
Say people are dying, right? The change
Right.
in behavior is how are people behaving in a more safe manner, right? So for example, so you're not measuring. So if, for example, if you run a training course, that's an output.
Right.
The outcome is what the training course has enabled you to do.
Right.
Right. And that's what you want to try and measure with the key result. The key result is the outcome you're trying to measure. How you get there, this is the beauty of OKRs. How you get there can be a number of ways. Online training, face-to-face training. I don't know what kind of training you could offer. You could offer any kind of training, but the outcome would be the same. Right. So the key thing is you're looking to see what is the outcome. What's the change in behavior? Now, what's the link between that and jobs to be done? Well, the change in behavior, the way somebody behaves is a visible, measurable, you can see what's going on. Okay. Right. But the job to be done is really figuring out what's going on inside the person's brain and heart to drive them to want to change that behavior.
Right.
So it's an insight, it's an internal insight, whereas OKR is more of an external observation of what's going on. The internal insight is really is coming from jobs to be done. That's really where it's getting to. And when you're interviewing customers, you're asking them about these drivers. What do you value? What do you believe? What's your struggle? When does it happen? These kind of things, right? So that you're trying to get to the root cause of what's going on, and that allows you to then think about the correct kind of outcome, which is the key result, which will then drive all your activities, all the things you're going to do, all the training courses and whatever you're going to do. Yeah. So it's really a separation of those two things, and this is really important. One of the key reasons why key results don't work is they are outputs, not outcomes. Right? They are things you're doing. Number of things I've done. That's not a key result, right? It's a change in behavior. It's an actual outcome. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's an important question. And
very good.
Hey, Jim, last question real quick. I see the canvases and they're more B2C focused. Do you have B2B canvases?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I would argue this is more of a buying job here.
Right.
I was talking about this with our partner Jan over at Venbridge. that jobs to be done is neither B2B or B2C, because jobs to be done, you're not necessarily starting with a solution. Jobs to be done is looking at, as Fred said, like, what are people trying to get done? Where do they struggle? And then we can extract that and just call it a struggle or an unmet need or something like that.
Right.
And the difference in B2B and B2C would be that where the buying decision is.
Right.
But otherwise, like I'm thinking of our canvas, the one that Elaine and I created, and it's like it's neither B2B or B2C.
Right.
Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that, because it's down to who you interview at the end.
Yeah.
If you're doing a B2C, it's the same person. I'm the
It's
buyer.
the same person. That's
I'm
right.
the person who has to service the thing, and I'm also have to serve the person who benefits from it. Whereas B2B, they're separate roles, typically separate roles. Yeah. So you have to. It's just more interviews. Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you bring to the table from the jobs to be done toolkits.
Yeah.
That are around, whatever your process is, you're still just going to be looking at fundamental human intent and what are people striving to get done, right? Ultimately, and it doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C. That's the way that I see it.
Well, here's where I was coming from on this, to kind of give you the insight. Where I was going with this is, okay, when I'm working as a knowledge manager inside my organization, okay, I am the staff director or whoever I'm working with is not a customer per se, right? They're not buying stuff per se. But the thing is, and this is a military term, so go with me on this. So the battle rhythm is how the organization gets to decision at the speed of relevance in one of three horizons: the now, the next, or the future, right? And so trying to get these guys to think through, okay, what's that key thing you have? This is where the OKRs come in, right? So what's that key result? What objective and key result are you trying to get to? This process will be executed over a fiscal year. Okay. But when you start talking about engaging external to the headquarters, when we work with our subordinate organizations, then that becomes more of a customer-centric outreach. Okay, that's great. Well, now I've got to turn this on my head now and look at it as a consultant within a community, right? Which is where one of my business paths. I normally live in Yorktown, Virginia. I'm visiting my dad and my brother up here in South Ozone Park. So I'm in the neighborhood, enjoying the spring weather with you guys, right? So, but when I'm dealing with the folks down there, it's B2B because they're small businesses that are trying to do something better for themselves so they can support their customers. So what's the unmet need internal to the organization that can be unlocked or done better or whatever, so that they can then engage, right? So that's the thinking, it's hybrid. So that's why when I'm saying, some of the language, I'm still trying to, organize it and stuff. It's fascinating stuff. I'm a gigantic fan of this thing, and I want to figure out a way to use it just because I think it's such a great way to look at stuff. That question of unmet need is so fascinating, and when you put it to people, you're really, first off, you cause them to freak out, but when you actually put the question to them, right, and say, what is the unmet need, then they're like, huh. And then you really get some thinking going. Okay, I will pause and yield to others, but thank you for the time.
Yeah, no worries, Fred. I have a thought there, but I'm curious what you were thinking as Brett was talking.
Yeah, go with your thoughts first, because I had
Okay. Yeah. One thing that we teach with our Canvas is that one of the things you need to identify is like, what field are you in, or what area or domain are you in? And the first best thing to do is to create a stakeholder map, or just list all of the actors involved, right? Because when you think about unmet needs, you can think about an unmet need from different stakeholder perspectives, right? And there's usually a value stream of some kind. There's usually somebody providing some service or solution, and that goes downstream, but there may be lots of other players or actors that are involved there as well. And sorting out that stakeholder ecosystem, you can talk about unmet needs from each of their perspectives, right? So the unmet need is not always just downstream to the end client, right? Buyers have unmet needs, but so do trainers and enablers and installers and coaches and people who might be in the ecosystem, but in between as well too, right? The thing about jobs to be done is it's very focused. So it says, pick the one that's core strategically core to what you're doing right now and start there. You can always do other analyses and look out, but you want to focus your energy on one at a time and separate that out in kind of a core way. That's what I was thinking, Fred.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. And I think that there's a couple of things when it comes to defining a need. And we get into it during the course, but it's really about, first of all, one need that everyone has is they want certainty, right? So they want certainty that whoever's helping me, I can get that job done. I can get it done 100% of the time. So certainty, reducing variability is really important. So the likelihood of you delivering on that need is something that's important to the customer, right? The other one, which is an obvious one, is how fast can you do it, right? That's the other one. That's the other obvious one, because time is money. Time is the universal thing that everyone has got a finite amount of. So those two, if you just focus on those two needs, there's lots of others you could focus on. But I would say if you want to focus on two, focus on minimizing the time it gets you to get to the outcome I want, right? And the second one is minimize the likelihood that I don't get this thing wrong, right? That I get this right every single time, right? So it's predictability, and so those are the two key ones I would say are really important to focus on.
Hey, Fred, I have another question for you. Our friend Jeff Gotthelf and Josh Seiden wrote a book on OKRs called Who Does What by How Much. Are you familiar with it at all?
I am, yeah. Brilliant book, yeah.
Because it's really about behavior change. And I wanted to go back to your point about OKRs should describe a behavior change. And the formula that they have for their customer, they call them customer-centric OKRs, is who, and in the jobs to be done language, we call it the job performer, or the person trying to get a job done. And then who does what, that's the behavior change, right? So it would be a car driver wants to reduce the time it takes to drive from New York to Chicago, right? And then there's a KR, which is often very specific. It's it could be, to Brett's point, sometimes it's a fantasy number, but other times it's a real number. But in any event, I just wanted to use that framework, who does what by how much, from Jeff Gotthelf. How does that play in with your approach here? Is that the same thing? Is that a good mnemonic?
It is the same.
Use?
Yeah, okay. It is the same thing. Exactly the same. And that's the definition between an OKR and a customer-centric OKR. Right. Because if you are focused on improving customer behavior, of course, what happens is, one, you'll get more customers, and two, you'll retain more customers will tell other customers. So it's really important to focus on where value comes from. Who pays the bills? Well, actually, it's the customer. So focusing on improving customer outcomes as measured by them. This is the key difference. I think this is the value add with including jobs to be done, because it gives you the insight of really as measured by myself. How do I know as a customer I'm improving? And this is a little bit of the value add, I think, that OKRs and maybe Jeff does do a bit, but I think it goes deeper and goes into more detail and is more nuanced.
I agree, and it's that detail. I would even say specificity as well too. Jobs to be done the way that Elaine and I teach it. We look at a very, very granular level. And I did a webinar with Jeff and Josh actually, where they had this example, and the who was I forget, some actor, and the does what was accomplish their task easily. And I reacted to the term easy, because it's like, yeah, every solution provider in the world can say we want our solution to be easy, but specifically what's hard, right? And I think what jobs to be done can do is to avoid having these hand-wavy OKRs that say, we want our customers to be able to do this easily by the end of the quarter. It's like, well, that's a bad KR, and then easily is not going to find the competitive advantage or the differentiator, right, in the market in terms of getting a need done. So when you bring jobs to be done and OKRs together, you can get really specific about that does what, the middle part of the KR.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And I think that the key, though, is really the customer interviews and interviewing customers in such a way that you're teasing out what's going on. And this is what's so nice about the four forces model, which we teach you in here, is really understanding what are the things which are going on, which are causing the customer to, come towards your solution, and also what's holding them back.
Yeah.
So
Can you zoom in there a little
is,
more, Fred? Can you zoom in there for folks?
Sure.
Like go right up to the 4 forces there on the left. Yeah, there it is.
I think I got this out of your book. I like this one, Jim.
That's not mine. No.
Is it not yours? Oh, okay.
I
thought it was out of yours. But anyway,
the color scheme is similar.
The color scheme is similar.
Yeah, the orange.
But yeah, so it's interviewing customers, really understanding where they are in the journey, and getting a deeper understanding. Because I think that it's very easy to get to. It's make it easier. If you don't really know what's going on in the customer's mind, well, I don't know, just make it easier, right? That's a cop out. I think that's a cop out. You don't really understand the problem well enough if you say that. Yeah.
I get everybody on the call permission. If you get an OKR that says make something easier, just raise your hand and say that's a cop out. Okay, everybody do that for me. I'm sure it'll help your career. No, but seriously, yeah, that is it. Yeah, everybody want, make it easier. And then the question is, what will make it easier, like specifically? And I think we can get more granular there as well too.
So there's a great question from John here. Yeah, I agree with it. It's interesting because there's a strategy model around a trade-off between getting the job done better or worse, and of offering something cheaper or more expensive, right? And there are different strategies. So if you think about, for example, Uber has a Lux service, right? So you get the job done better, arguably, than a regular taxi, but you pay more. There's also something called an Uber pool model, which gets the job done worse, right? Because you have to share with somebody you don't know, but because you're sharing the fare, it's cheaper. So it's not always that you're trying to get it better, faster, cheaper. It's a trade-off between cost and the amount of money people are willing to pay for that kind of service. In fact, disruptive innovation from Clay Christensen is really about getting the job done worse but charging lower money. And then eventually over time you increase your capability and eventually you take over the premium brand. So yeah, great question, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that, John?
Well, so you've challenged my thinking about OKRs. But if you start with the strategic context of what's your competitive business model, which could be to get the job done worse or to get the job done better, right? Sprint Airlines is a different model than United Airlines, right? Is there a danger in informing OKRs through jobs to be done? I've always approached OKRs as my business model context, which prioritizes what jobs to be done are most important. Like I viewed it as like when you're designing, you're aligning business outcomes and user outcomes. And OKRs are my business outcomes. Jobs to be done are my user outcomes. So I view them as two separate things to help drive alignment.
Agree. I think that the key thing before you do your OKRs, you really need to have a strategy. Yeah. So the strategy is really John's put in the chat a nice one about getting the job done better or worse. So you need to understand what your strategy is. If your strategy is going to be getting the job done worse and charging less money, then your OKRs will be around how do we drive down costs, right? How would we drive down costs, but do just enough to keep the customer happy, So like a Ryanair budget kind of thing. So yes, you're right. So there is an element. That's something we teach you in the course as well. But I'm oversimplifying it here. In terms of you can't go straight from jobs to be done to OKRs. You do need strategy in between, but it does inform it. I think in terms of understanding, this is quite a good model to help you understand.
John, I would also challenge that kind of distinction between the customer need and the business need, because I don't know any business that doesn't have a market of people, human beings that they serve. That is to say, business success ultimately, in almost any case that I can think of, relies on serving some human need. You know what I mean? So the two are not inseparable to me. And I think that's the problem with a lot of strategy in OKRs is that people are talking to themselves about their own numbers and their own business. But the thing that drives them is going to always be the customer. They always decide your success or not.
Yeah, but as you called out, there's problem space, solution space. So healthcare.
Yeah.
I live in Canada. Does healthcare work for me? Well, it's cheap, but for elective surgery, I go to the US. So do I get the job done? I get the job done through two different healthcare systems.
Yeah.
One that's tailored to low cost and one that's tailored to elective surgery. Best healthcare in the world. So it's the job to be done is separate from the solution space. And so do I design for every customer's job to be done? No, I pick and choose where I want to compete and why.
Okay.
So the unmet need then is getting healthy. The unmet need is I do not have the ability to use my shoulder the way I want to. How do I get that done? Right. And so, the unmet need is fulfilled either less expensively but slower by using the Canadian system to follow your model, or I can get it done more comprehensively in a US facility. So it isn't better or worse. It's really basically about what's going to fulfill the need based on what I have available for resources and time, right? Is that how you're framing that?
Well, just multiple solutions can serve the job to be done.
Yeah, that's why I got a little hung up on get it done worse versus get it done better. I guess again, I apologize if my brain's not fully,
No, you're good.
No, you're great. Yeah.
We call it Jobs to be Untangled, Brett, because we're all trying to figure this out together. So
okay, so all right.
None of us here have the absolute definitive answer that we're all negotiating this here together. That's the purpose of the call, right?
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But I'm not completely screwed up here. All right.
No,
as you can see, I'm a Padawan now to this thing. So,
No, you're not. No, you're not. You're right there, man. Cool. We got another 10 minutes or so. Was there another topic or something? We're kind of dominating this here, and I just wanted to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask a question. I see Sabrina on here. I see all kinds of other people. Olivier, Dom. Hey, Dom. Dom showed up. Brandon's here. Anybody else have any other thoughts or questions? Hi, Sabrina.
I'm kind of curious, just if anybody wants to comment in the chat, who's currently working on OKRs? Or has that part of your workflow already passed? Is it a different season? I'm just curious, like where different folks are in the process of working with these, if you are doing so.
If you are at all, right?
Yeah, that might be interesting for
not everyone works with OKRs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Jonas. I used to use OKRs at Mural. We switched to something less formal actually, but we're not using OKRs. Are other folks using OKRs at all?
I used them at my last corporate job and found them very useful. Yeah. Yeah, but we had a really well-written guide by a very sort of politically popular design leader. And so I think that contributed to a general feeling of the likelihood of success. So there were a lot of other things kind of going on in the background, but the OKRs that this design leader provided us with were very thoughtfully written and aligned well with the strategy that he was creating.
Anyone else using OKRs regularly?
Okay, so my experience, we're using it right now, but it's or we've been using it. It's a fairly big organization, and we have tons of different teams. We are also shifting for a product operating model from being more like a domain, what's the name? Safe, that type of safe, agile thing. And being a designer from the beginning, I kind of intuitively felt it was wrong. But I see some of we're still lacking the type of strategies, that type of explanation that will make us self-guiding. And then the OKRs, they kind of arrive as popcorns in a way. And so it's not really guiding me in kind of creating better, not autonomous teams, but at least teams that knows they have a like a gut feeling where their roadmap should head. Yeah, that kind of thing. So
great,
but still, I mean, it's good though.
Thanks for that, Jonas. You introduced a really interesting concept of autonomy or empowerment. And Fred, I find jobs to be knowing that struggle can be very empowering for a team, right? Rather than just saying, hey, do this easily, quickly, like launch that thing so it's easy and make it quick. That's not good. But to say, hey, we want to address something very specific, it can actually be empowering when you have these customer-centric OKRs. That's what I found.
Yeah, I agree, totally agree. And it's one of the reasons I call my company Elevating Work, because I think there is a disconnect between what you're actually doing to help the customer and what people do day to day. And I think that the combination of jobs to be done and OKRs as well, because an OKR, remember, is an outcome, a customer outcome. Now, the customer, as I said, it could be somebody, external, it could be a real end customer, but it could also be you're a platform team supporting an app team. And your job is to help them deliver the apps more quickly, more securely, more, with more functionality, whatever. So really, the knowledge that you're helping somebody else improve their life, make progress, I think is a very motivating thing. So one of the things about OKRs, if they're done right, they have a cultural element to them. And often what I find myself doing is writing culture OKRs, because really how you behave towards other people and how is really an OKR in itself, because really what you're trying to do is a change in behavior, right? And that's what a culture is. It's a behavior, and a cultural OKR is promoting a behavioral change in the positive direction. I've written a few articles on that. You can check them out on my blog. But I think you're right. It is really. It's really about getting that across to people. And the empowerment point, back to your, Jonas, is really about the key thing about it. If an OKR is done right, it tells you what the outcome is, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. Right. You as a team have to figure that out. And it's always time boxed. If you use Agile, it's like you got 2 weeks, you got to change the outcome for this customer. How the hell are you going to do it in 2 weeks with 5 people? It's like, whoa, let's scratch our heads. Right. So I think that's really kind of empowering and motivating. So I think combined with Agile and Lean, I think it also helps as well to give you that impetus.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. Thanks for that, Fred. Elaine, I don't know if we had any wrap up thoughts or questions. We're coming to the end of the session here.
Yeah, no wrap up questions. I think we covered everything that was asked in the chat. Thank you everybody for participating in the conversation, coming up stage, chatting, really wonderful interactions across the board. I posted some links on the chat that we've been sort of referencing throughout today. And Fred, thank you so much. It's been so much fun to collaborate with you on developing this workshop and sort of learning more about OKRs and the different corners of jobs to be done. And I appreciate that experience so much.
Yeah.
So thank you for
when
sharing
are we going to be
today.
back here, Elaine? When's the next session? May, what's the exact
May
date?
29th.
May 29th. Yeah, and I'm going to be here with my new friend, Beth McHugh, who's also a Jobs to be Done practitioner. So we're going to keep the conversation going, or shift the conversation to another topic, but Jobs to be Done related. So Brett and everybody else, if you're curious about Jobs to be Done and you want to learn together as we untangle this all, come visit us in May. If you subscribe to our newsletter, we'll be promoting it there. You can also follow me or Elaine on LinkedIn, and we'll be posting things on LinkedIn. Yeah, Dom, thanks for coming. Thanks, everybody. It's great to see everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Brett and John. Great question.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Fred. Cheers.